Think about what a child did today. They went to school. They sat at a desk for 6 hours. They were told what to learn, when to eat, when to speak, and when to be quiet. They came home, did homework, watched a screen. Then they went to bed and did it again tomorrow. Now take all of that away. No school, no desks, no curriculum, no homework, no adults telling a child what they needed to become. For 99% of human history, that system didn't exist. So what did ancient children actually do all day? The answer isn't what archaeologists assumed. And when researchers finally started looking at the evidence, really looking, they found something that made them question everything we think we know about childhood, learning, and what children are actually built for. For most of the 20th century, archaeologists largely ignored children. Not intentionally. It's just that children leave almost no trace. Their bones are small and fragile, and rarely survive tens of thousands of years in the ground. Their tools, if they had them, were smaller versions of adult tools and got classified as adult tools. Their footprints were assumed to be those of small adults. Then in 2016, a researcher named Silvia Bello at the Natural History Museum in London was re-examining a set of ancient bones from a cave in Somerset, England. Bones that had been sitting in a museum drawer since 1903. She noticed something that everyone before her had missed: the cut marks. On the bones of a 3-year-old child, 14,000 years old, were deliberate cut marks. The same marks made when flesh is removed from bone with a stone tool. The child had been defleshed after death. Their bones had then been used to make tools, specifically a cup. Researchers were shocked. But Bello pointed out something that reframed the entire discovery. This wasn't violence. This wasn't disposal. This was ceremony. The same cuts appeared on adult bones at the same site. The child had received exactly the same treatment as the adults. In death, there was no distinction. The child was a full member of the group, which meant that in life, they probably were too. In 2023, anthropologist David Lancy at Utah State University published a summary of 40 years of research into childhood across hunter-gatherer societies. His conclusion overturned almost everything the modern world assumes about children. Ancient children didn't play. They worked. Except that's not quite right either, because in hunter-gatherer societies, the line between play and work didn't exist. A 5-year-old in the Hadza tribe of Tanzania doesn't play at hunting. They hunt. They go with adults into the bush and watch, observe, imitate. They carry small bows. They practice the same throws the adults use. By the time they're 10, they've been doing it for 5 years. By the time they're 12, they're contributing real food to the group. A 6-year-old girl among the AKA foragers in Central Africa doesn't play house. She carries her infant sibling on her hip for hours while her mother works. She helps process food. She watches the fire. Lancy called this the Lego model of childhood, children as apprentices, absorbed into adult activity from the earliest age they were physically capable of participation. But here's what he found that nobody expected. Children weren't forced into this. They wanted it. In every hunter-gatherer society studied, children were observed to actively seek inclusion in adult tasks. They watched. They imitated. They inserted themselves into whatever the adults were doing. The anthropological word for it is intent participation, and it appears in every culture on Earth that hasn't been industrialized. The desire to do real things alongside real people isn't something we teach children, it's something we're born with. In 2020, a team of archaeologists working at White Sands National Park in New Mexico found something in a dry lake bed that stopped everyone cold. Footprints. Thousands of them. Pressed into ancient mud and preserved for over 10,000 years. The team's tracking expert, a man named Bustos, began to read the prints the way a detective reads a crime scene. And he found something nobody expected. The majority of the footprints were small. Children. Everywhere. Running, sliding, playing, circling back on themselves. One set of tracks showed a child running at full speed, then abruptly stopping. Then, the prints of an adult appearing beside them. Then, both sets of prints walking together in the same direction. Bustos described one trackway that showed a toddler walking alone, veering off toward the water's edge, being intercepted by an adult, and then walking in a completely different direction. 10,000 years old, and completely recognizable to any parent who has ever taken a toddler to a park. But other footprints told a different story. Children's prints leading to a mammoth carcass, overlapping with adult prints around the same site. Small handprints in the mud alongside large ones. They weren't just playing, they were working the carcass alongside adults. Children as young as 5 or 6, based on the size of the prints, processing a mammoth, not because they were forced to, because that's what was happening. And they were there. In 1943, a psychologist named Abraham Maslow published a paper proposing a hierarchy of human needs. At the base, food, water, shelter, safety, then belonging, then esteem. At the top, self-actualization, the need to do meaningful things, to contribute, to become. Maslow thought self-actualization was rare, something most people never reached. What the research on ancient childhood suggests is that he had it backwards. Ancient children didn't spend years being taught things before being allowed to participate in life. They participated in life from the beginning. They watched real things happen, they tried real things, they contributed real things. The learning and the doing were the same activity. In 2015, developmental psychologist Peter Gray at Boston College published research showing that the dramatic rise in childhood anxiety, depression, and feelings of helplessness in modern children correlates almost perfectly with the decline of free, self-directed play and the rise of adult, controlled, structured activity. Children who are never allowed to do real things, who spend their days being taught rather than doing, develop a particular kind of helplessness, a sense that their actions don't matter, that real life is somewhere in the future, after enough preparation. Ancient children had no such preparation phase. They were real participants from the beginning, and the evidence in the footprints, in the bones, in 40 years of field research suggests that this wasn't just fine. It was exactly what the human child was built for. So what did ancient children do all day? They hunted, they foraged, they carried siblings, they watched fires, they processed animals, they played in ways that were also practice, they practiced in ways that were also play. They were never told that childhood was a waiting room. They were never made to sit still and prepare for a life that would begin later. They were just alive, fully, from the beginning. 10,000 years ago, a child ran along a muddy lakebed in New Mexico and left their footprints in the earth. We can still read them, and what they say is simpler than anything we've built since. I was here. I was part of this. I was real.